Disclaimer: it's inspired by reality, shaped by imagination.
The View's studio was already buzzing before the cameras even rolled. Something about today's guest had the crew on edge. When the red light blinked on and the theme music faded, Whoopi Goldberg smiled at the camera, though even she seemed curious about what was about to unfold. Today's topic, she said, is one that tends to get people talking and sometimes shouting. Should patriotism be a stronger theme in American entertainment? Beside her sat Joy Behar, arms folded, lips pursed in her familiar mix of amusement and challenge. And across from her, in a sharp navy suit and an unmistakable old Hollywood presence, was Eric Roberts. The applause was polite, but his energy wasn't. He leaned in, smiling that half smile that said he'd come not just to talk, but to argue. "Look," Eric began, voice smooth but deliberate, "I love this country, always have. But somewhere along the way, we decided being proud of it is controversial. That's a mistake. Entertainment used to celebrate America, the grit, the hope, the heart. Now it mostly apologizes for it." Joy's eyebrows shot up. "Or maybe," she said coolly, "it's finally being honest about it." The crowd laughed nervously. Whoopi's grin widened. And just like that, what started as a polite conversation about patriotism was about to turn into a cultural brawl, live on daytime TV.
The camera panned across the panel as the applause died down. Eric Roberts adjusted his mic, his posture calm but his tone already stirring with conviction. "See, Joy, patriotism isn't politics, it's gratitude. It's saying, I'm lucky to live in a place that gives me freedom to speak my mind, even if that freedom gets uncomfortable. Somewhere along the way, Hollywood decided that loving your country meant you were naive, or worse, dangerous." Joy folded her hands and tilted her head. "Or maybe people just got tired of pretending everything's perfect. You can't wrap the flag around every movie and call it depth. We've got to tell the truth, not just the pretty version of it." Eric nodded, but his eyes sharpened. "I'm not talking about propaganda. I'm talking about balance. We've gone from celebrating American values to sneering at them. You can't have heroes anymore without someone calling it nationalism." Whoopi jumped in before Joy could reply. "But Eric, entertainment changes with the culture. When times are hard, people start questioning what those values even mean. Patriotism means different things to different people." Eric smiled faintly. "That's fine. But when's the last time a blockbuster showed America as something worth fighting for? Without irony, without cynicism. We used to tell stories that inspired. Now we tell ones that apologize." The audience murmured in agreement. Joy leaned forward, a small grin forming. "Come on, Eric. You're acting like Hollywood's job is to do PR for America. It's art. It's supposed to challenge, not comfort." Eric chuckled under his breath. "Challenge, yes, but not insult. There's a difference." That landed. Whoopi arched her brow, sensing tension building. Sonny Hosteen joined in, her tone careful. "But Eric, don't you think part of loving your country is being honest about its flaws? Art holds up a mirror. Sometimes people don't like what they see." Eric nodded. "Sure, but if all we ever show are the cracks, the mirror stops reflecting. It distorts. You can't raise a generation on stories that say their country is broken and expect them to believe in fixing it." Joy jumped on that. "You sound like you want blind loyalty. Patriotism shouldn't mean silence." "I never said silence, I said respect. There's a big difference between questioning your country and despising it. A lot of people in entertainment can't tell the difference anymore." The audience clapped, a few cheers ringing out from the back rows. Joy didn't flinch. "And a lot of people use patriotism as a shield when they don't want to face reality. We've got issues, big ones, inequality, corruption, division. Waving the flag doesn't fix any of that." Eric leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table. "It doesn't fix it, but it reminds us why it's worth fixing. Patriotism isn't pretending everything's fine. It's caring enough to believe it can be." Even Whoopi paused at that one. The crowd applauded again, more evenly this time. Ana Navarro smiled. "You know, Eric, that's a pretty balanced take, but you've got to admit, sometimes the word patriotism has been hijacked. People hear it and think of politics, not unity." Eric's voice softened. "I get that, but that's why entertainment matters. It's the one space where we can remind people what the word really means. You think about those old films, Jimmy Stewart, Gregory Peck. They didn't preach. They showed decency, courage, responsibility. Those used to be American traits. Now they're punchlines. Joy's lips tightened. That's because the world changed, Eric. The stories changed with it. People don't want to be told how to feel about their country anymore. They want the truth, even when it's ugly. Eric smiled, a little sadly. And maybe that's the problem. We've forgotten that loving something doesn't mean denying its flaws. It means standing by it even when it disappoints you. The audience broke into applause again. Whoopi gestured between them, half laughing. Okay, I see where this is going. We've got the idealist and the realist. One believes patriotism uplifts us, the other says it blinds us. I think we're just getting started. Joy turned toward Eric. I'm just saying, when you talk about patriotism, it can sound like nostalgia for an America that never existed. The movies you're talking about, they skipped over a lot of people's realities. Eric's tone remained calm, but his eyes darkened. Maybe, but they also gave people something to believe in. That's what stories are supposed to do. You can tell the truth and still offer hope. There was a brief silence before the crowd responded. Soft clapping, a few cheers from the back rows. Whoopi smiled knowingly. You both make strong points, but this one's getting warm, so buckle up, everyone. The camera slowly zoomed in on Eric and Joy as the show headed to its first break. Joy sipped her coffee, smiling like she'd just begun to enjoy herself. Eric leaned back, calm but ready. Because the spark had been lit, and everyone watching knew this wasn't going to stay polite.
When the show returned from commercial, the audience could sense it. The politeness was gone. The smiles were thinner, the pauses longer. Whoopi glanced toward the camera, that half grin of hers returning like she knew she'd just stepped into a storm. All right, she said, we're back, and if you thought that first half was spirited, hang on to your coffee. The crowd laughed lightly, but Eric Roberts and Joy Behar were already locked in. Joy was first to fire. You know, Eric, I respect your passion, but when you talk about patriotism and entertainment, it sounds like you're asking for propaganda. It's art's job to question power, not flatter it. Eric leaned forward, his voice calm but charged. And who said patriotism is flattery? You can love your country and question it. But if every story we tell paints America as the villain, that's not art. It's cynicism dressed as progress. Joy smirked. Or maybe it's honesty. People are tired of flag-waving fairy tales. We've seen what happens when we ignore our darker sides. Eric didn't flinch. You mean when we forget our better ones? That line drew applause from several in the crowd. Whoopi gave a low whistle. Okay, that's a quote right there. Joy, sensing the room shift, doubled down. You want patriotism in Hollywood? Fine. But let's be real. Whose patriotism are we talking about? Because for a lot of people in this country, those old-fashioned ideals you're talking about didn't include them. Eric's eyes sharpened. That's exactly why we need better stories, not to erase the past, but to show how far we've come. Patriotism doesn't belong to one race or one class or one party. It belongs to everyone who still believes this country can be better. The audience erupted in applause. Joy tapped her pen against the table, half smiling, but clearly irritated. You're a romantic, Eric. That's sweet. But people don't want sermons about how great America is while they're struggling to afford rent. Eric laughed softly, shaking his head. And maybe if Hollywood stopped feeding people despair and started feeding them hope, they'd remember what they're capable of. That landed hard. The crowd cheered again. Whoopi leaned back, smiling at the chaos. I love my job, she muttered under her breath, just loud enough for the mic to catch. Sonny jumped in, trying to balance the tone. But Eric, don't you think optimism can sometimes sound dismissive, like you're ignoring people's pain? Eric nodded respectfully. Not at all. I'm saying you can acknowledge pain without glorifying it. We've built a culture where the only thing we celebrate is outrage. Every film's about corruption, greed, failure. That's not realism anymore. It's addiction. Joy raised her eyebrow. Addiction? To cynicism, to hopelessness. You can't inspire people by constantly reminding them how broken everything is. Joy countered instantly. And you can't fix anything by pretending it's fine. The two glared at each other, voices rising slightly. Eric gestured toward the audience. Look at them. Do you think these people wake up wanting to hate their own country? Of course not. But that's what our media feeds them every day. That America's finished, rotten, unfixable. I don't buy it. And I won't make excuses for the people who push that narrative. Joy leaned forward, eyes flashing. You talk like patriotism's under attack. It's not. People just got smarter about questioning power. Maybe what you call negativity is just accountability. Accountability's fine, Eric said, his tone still even but firm. But you can't build anything on guilt. At some point, you have to remember what made this country worth fighting for in the first place. A murmur of agreement ran through the audience. Ana Navarro smiled, amused. I feel like I'm watching a 4th of July barbecue turn into a boxing match. Whoopi chuckled. Welcome to the view, honey. Joy wasn't done. Eric, you keep saying Hollywood doesn't love America. But what about all the movies that do? Top Gun, Saving Private Ryan, Hidden Figures. Those were love letters to American courage and unity. Eric nodded. Exactly. And they worked because people needed that. They were proud. You know what else they were? Rare. We get one movie like that every few years and 100 that tell us we're doomed. I'm saying, balance it out. Joy frowned. Maybe people are just drawn to the truth. Eric met his gaze, unwavering. Or maybe they're just tired of being told to hate what they raised them. The audience fell quiet. Whoopi finally leaned in, her tone gentler now. You two are really arguing about one thing. What role art should play in hope? Whether it should tell us who we are or who we could be. Joy sighed. That's fair. Eric nodded. It's both, but somewhere along the line we dropped the second part. Whoopi looked at the camera, smiling softly. And that, folks, is why we invite Eric Roberts to this table. Because sometimes a little heat reminds us we're all still paying attention. The audience laughed and clapped, but even as the applause swelled, you could see it in both their faces. This debate wasn't done. The lines had been drawn. The sparks had turned to fire, and the next exchange would push both of them right to their emotional limits.
The energy in the studio thickened until even the audience fell quiet. Joy's smirk faded as Eric leaned forward, his voice suddenly sharper, more personal. Let me tell you something, Joy, he said, pointing slightly but not aggressively. I've worked in Hollywood for nearly 5 decades. I've seen generations of actors, directors, and writers come and go. But one thing that's changed, dangerously changed, is how ashamed we've become of our own flag. The room stirred. Joy crossed her arms. No one's ashamed, Eric. We're just not pretending everything's perfect. That's the problem. You think loving your country means pretending it's perfect. It doesn't. It means believing it's worth fighting for. It means telling stories that remind people why it matters. The audience applauded lightly, but Joy wasn't backing down. I think the problem, she replied, is that patriotism has been used as a shield for bad behavior. It's become political theater. You can't separate the flag from what people do under it. Eric paused, then nodded slowly. You're right, it has been used. But we don't fix that by burning the stage. We fix it by taking the meaning back. That line hit differently. Even Whoopi looked thoughtful. Joy leaned closer, her tone quieter but firm. You think movies should wave the flag more. I think they should hold a mirror up to what's really going on. That's not anti-American, that's honest. He chuckled softly. And that honesty is good as long as it doesn't turn into cynicism. You remember when people used to leave the theater feeling proud to be American? Not naive, not blind, just proud. Sure, but a lot of those people weren't seeing the full picture. He smiled sadly. And now, too many can't see any of the good left. The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was heavy. The kind of silence where everyone in the room was thinking about something they hadn't considered before. Eric leaned back, almost reflective. I grew up watching John Wayne, Jimmy Stewart, even early Clint Eastwood. Those men weren't just playing heroes. They believed in something bigger. You don't have to agree with their politics to feel the difference. That kind of storytelling inspired people. Now it feels like we're afraid to inspire anyone." Joy sighed. Maybe we just don't want to lie to them anymore. Truth without hope is just despair. The words hum in the air like smoke. Even Joy hesitated, as if she'd been momentarily disarmed. Whoopi glanced between them. "You two might actually agree more than you think," she said softly. "Sounds like you both want honesty, but one wants to remember what's worth loving, and the other wants to make sure we don't forget what needs changing." Joy gave a half smile. That's a fair way to put it. But Eric wasn't done. "It's not just about movies," he added, his voice rising again. "It's about what we teach. The stories we tell shape how the next generation sees the world. If all they hear is that America is broken, what reason do they have to fix it?" Joy leaned forward, meeting his gaze. "Maybe hearing it's broken is exactly what makes them want to fix it." That line earned applause from a younger section of the audience. But Eric didn't flinch. He smiled sadly and said, "Then I hope they remember to fix it because they love it, not because they hate it." The studio went silent again. It wasn't shouting. It wasn't mockery. It was conviction versus conviction. Two visions of love for the same country colliding in full view of millions watching at home. And as the camera slowly panned across the hosts' faces, it was clear that this wasn't just a debate anymore. It was a question everyone was silently asking themselves: when did loving your country become controversial?
The studio felt different now. Tense, but strangely intimate, as if everyone knew the next few moments could define the entire conversation. Whoopi tried to shift the tone. "All right, before this turns into a Civil War reenactment," she joked, "let's talk about what this means for the next generation of artists." But Eric wasn't smiling anymore. He leaned forward, elbows on the table. "That's exactly who I'm worried about, Whoopi. My grandkids are growing up in a country where patriotism is treated like a punchline. You wear a flag pin, and people assume your politics. You say you love America, and they roll their eyes. That's not progress, that's confusion." Joy's tone turned colder. "Or maybe it's accountability. Maybe young people are just tired of blind loyalty. They see the flaws we ignored for decades." Eric's eyes hardened. "You call it blind loyalty, I call it gratitude. There's a big difference between criticizing your country and resenting it." The audience reacted with scattered applause. Whoopi sighed, shaking her head slightly. "You keep saying that like criticism equals hate. But if you truly love something, you want it to get better. That's all this generation is trying to do." Eric raised his voice a notch, his composure cracking for the first time. "But where's the balance, Joy? When every movie, every show, every award speech paints America as the villain, what message are we sending? That we're a mistake? That we have nothing left worth defending?" Joy's eyes narrowed. "You're exaggerating. Art reflects the times we live in. If it feels dark, maybe that's because people are hurting." "Then help them believe again," Eric shot back. "That's what entertainment used to do. It lifted people when they were down. It gave them something to hold on to." The air in the studio turned electric. Even the audience wasn't sure whether to clap or sit still. Whoopi tried again to mediate. "You're both right in a way. Art should reflect truth, but it should also give hope. Maybe we've leaned too hard one way." But Joy wasn't letting go. "Eric, you're acting like patriotism disappeared. It hasn't. It's just more complicated now. You can't demand people feel pride when they're still fighting for fairness." Eric's reply was quiet, but sharp. "And you can't build fairness on shame." That line hit hard. Joy leaned back, visibly irritated. "Oh, please, no one's trying to shame anyone. We're trying to be real. It's called growing up." Eric nodded slowly. "Maybe. But sometimes growing up means remembering what made you strong, not tearing it apart." The crowd clapped again, louder this time. A few even stood up. Whoopi looked out at them, half amused, half frustrated. "So, you want more patriotic movies? More soldiers, more flags, more speeches about the American dream? Because that's not the only story worth telling." Eric shook his head. "No, I want more truthful ones. Patriotism doesn't mean propaganda.
It means balance, showing our faults, yes, but also our courage, our compassion, our progress. We've lost that balance, and now people can't tell the difference between criticism and contempt. Joy opened her mouth to respond, but Eric wasn't done. His voice steadied, firm but emotional. My father was a soldier. My mother worked 2 jobs. They weren't perfect people, but they loved this country, and they believed it could be better. That's what patriotism is. You build, you don't break. For a moment, the entire panel was silent. Joy's expression softened just slightly, but she quickly caught herself. Eric, I get that. But for a lot of people, that same flag represents pain. History hasn't treated everyone equally under it. So forgive me if some of us hesitate to celebrate before we fix what's broken. Eric nodded. Then fix it with pride, not bitterness. Because when we teach people to only see the worst in their home, they stop believing it's theirs to protect. It was one of those rare moments on The View when the laughter and applause faded, and all that was left was truth colliding from 2 directions. Whoopi finally spoke, her tone serious. I think what we're really talking about isn't just patriotism, it's belonging. Who feels seen in the stories we tell? Eric turned to her, nodding. Exactly. Patriotism should include everyone. It's not a color, a party, or a paycheck. It's the feeling that this country, for all its flaws, is still ours, and that's something worth celebrating. The crowd broke into applause, this time steady and unified. Joy looked at him, no longer smirking. You really believe that, don't you? Eric smiled faintly. Every word. As the applause continued, Joy glanced toward the audience, thoughtful now. Maybe that's the kind of patriotism we can both live with. The camera lingered on the 2 of them. Joy still guarded, Eric visibly relieved. For once, The View didn't feel like a shouting match. It felt like a crossroads. The debate had pushed them both to the edge, but it had also revealed something deeper. Patriotism wasn't dead. It was just fighting to be understood.
When the cameras came back from commercial, the mood on set had shifted. The earlier tension had cooled into something almost reflective. Whoopi glanced around the table, her voice lower now. You know, this might have been one of the most honest conversations we've had in a while. Joy gave a quiet laugh. That's one way to put it. She looked over at Eric, her tone gentler. I'll admit, you made me think a little. Maybe the word patriotism got tangled up with too many bad memories for some of us. Eric nodded, his voice steady but softer. That's understandable. Patriotism can't mean pretending everything's perfect. It just means believing things can get better and doing your part to help them get there. Sonny Hostin, who had been mostly quiet during the clash, spoke up thoughtfully. You know, I grew up in a house where my father always told me, love your country, but love your people first. Maybe that's what we've lost, seeing patriotism as connection, not competition. Eric smiled. Exactly. It's not a contest over who loves America more. It's about whether we care enough to make sure everyone feels proud to be here. The audience applauded, quieter this time, like they were absorbing something instead of reacting to it. Joy leaned back in her chair, exhaling. I'll say this much, Eric, you've got guts. Coming on The View and giving a speech about loving America. The crowd laughed. Eric grinned. Well, someone's got to do it. Whoopi chimed in, smiling faintly. That's what art's supposed to do, though. Whether it's a joke, a movie, or a debate at this table, it's supposed to make people feel something. We've just gotten so scared of being misunderstood that we forget how to say what we really mean. Eric nodded slowly. And sometimes what we mean isn't complicated. We love this place. We want it to live up to its promise. Joy tilted her head. You ever think maybe that's what the younger generation's doing too, just in a different way? Less flags, more fixing? Eric smiled faintly. Maybe. But sometimes fixing comes easier when you remember what's already good. There was a brief silence before Whoopi spoke again, her tone quiet but clear. Maybe the real answer isn't whether patriotism should be stronger in entertainment, it's whether empathy should. Because if we get that part right, everything else follows. The audience clapped warmly, a few people even nodding through smiles. Eric turned to Joy and extended his hand. Thanks for pushing back. I don't mind a fight if it ends with understanding. Joy laughed, shaking his hand. Well, you got one hell of a round in today, I'll give you that. The whole table smiled as the applause rose again, this time more heartfelt. It wasn't the kind of ending that came from agreement, it came from acknowledgement. As the camera zoomed out, Whoopi's voice carried the final line. At the end of the day, maybe loving your country isn't about shouting it. It's about showing it, whether through words, art, or action. The lights dimmed slightly as the outro music started to play, and Eric leaned back in his chair, a quiet smile crossing his face. Joy looked over at him again, her tone softer than it had been all show. You know, maybe you should write a movie about this conversation. Eric chuckled. Maybe I already have. The audience laughed with him, and for the first time that morning, the table felt lighter, like they'd walked through a storm and come out with a little more respect for the ground beneath them. As the credits rolled, the message lingered long after the laughter faded. Patriotism isn't loud. It isn't perfect. It's personal. And when it shows up honestly, even a talk show debate can remind people what it means to belong. If you found this exchange powerful, make sure to subscribe for more emotional showdowns, viral debates, and unforgettable TV moments. Drop a comment below. Do you think patriotism still has a place in American entertainment today?